So welcome. Thanks for joining us. We're excited to have you. It's going to be a quick hour. So we're going to scratch the surface of a number of things, but hopefully get some ideas out there for you and just get you sort of connected to what we're doing and share resources with you. And again, learn each time we do this. So this is part of the No Wrong Door series. We hope to do this monthly so that you can really learn from other people who are working in organizations that we consider a front door. So maybe you work for an independent living center, maybe you work for an area agency on aging, maybe you work as a provider, or you work in the, you provide assistive technology. But when we say front door, what we're really meaning is how are we helping anybody that needs supports? And how are we as professionals connecting them to the services and supports that they need? So that's our No Wrong Door concept. And it's a big national initiative. It's been around for a number of years. The other thing we'll introduce you to is the Charting the Life course framework for planning and problem solving. Some of you might be familiar with it. Some of it might be the first time I've talked about it. So we're again going to kind of scratch the surface of this sort of problem solving framework that can help you in your day-to-day jobs or working with in your own life. We're also going to specifically focus on living at home, ways to live at home more efficiently, to stay safe at home, and to talk about how technology and other supports can really help us in every one of our lives. And the last thing we hope to offer you is information about local services and supports and where you can learn on how to make some of these things happen. Real quick overview of who I am, and then David will share who he is when I pass it off to him in a couple of minutes. But my name is Shelley Reynolds, and I work at the University of Missouri, Kansas City Institute for Human Development, where I've been staffed for over 25 years, really working on projects specifically for individuals with developmental disabilities and other disabilities, as well as really looking at sort of policy and programmatic changes on how to support the entire family unit, whether it's early childhood all the way through aging. So we have a number of initiatives that really support this work. Our Family to Family, we have the large national community of practice on supports to families, and then the Life Course framework is something new that's evolved out of there. If you're just joining us and haven't done it already, we'd love to hear from you in the chat just to let us know who all's here. So really quickly, let me tell you about the No Wrong Door. The No Wrong Door, as Administration for Community Living talks about it, is a way to transform the way people access services. We know that a lot of people that need long-term services and supports don't have the information they need to make informed choices and informed decisions. They're unsure how to navigate both paid and unpaid supports, as well as setting and achieving personal goals and really deciding on the types of services and supports that they want. That's the underlying vision at the federal level of what they're wanting states to partner on and work through. Missouri doesn't currently have a No Wrong Door grant specifically, but because of the CARES Act funding with COVID, we have a one-year initiative that to begin having these conversations, which will hopefully evolve into a more formal No Wrong Door system in Missouri. We partner with a lot of different organizations to do this. Obviously, Missouri Assistive Tech, Missouri, our M4A, the Area Agency on Aging statewide organizations, MOSIL, the other independent living centers, but also very specifically with the state service systems, Department of Mental Health, the Health and Senior Services, Missouri Health Net. They are the front doors to our formal government paid services and supports. So how are we looking at that? What does that journey feel like? How can we make it more efficient? Do we all know about each other? How are we referring to each other? Is the ultimate goal of really a No Wrong Door initiative. We specifically are using this year to begin hosting trainings for staff like you, for families, and how can we really start figuring out what are different topics that doesn't matter where we work or what populations we work with, but will help us get better at serving those in our target population. The other thing that we're doing is we're running some pilot projects. So a number of you involved in what we call our robotics pet project. And so purchasing robotic pets and getting those to people that are living at home to see the levels of, does this decrease loneliness and social isolation? So there's a number of opportunities for other ongoing things. Charting the life course, just a really quick overview of this. This is a national framework. Actually, it's being used in other countries as well, but it's really a framework with key principles for driving transformational change. But it also comes with it a set of very concrete tools that you can use on a phone call, you can use for long-term strategic planning, you can use it for changing legislative policy or advocating in meetings or bringing a big group of people together. The framework itself was created by individuals with disabilities and their families. It's designed for all ages and all abilities. I have many people come to me and say, well, my husband and I use this to think about retirement. Or somebody else came to me and said, I'm thinking about this on how it relates to my health and making decisions with my doctors. So it's really designed to really give you a sort of a problem-solving methodology to really help you articulate what you want and what your goals are. Here are some of the tools. Maybe some of you have seen them. These are some of our foundational tools, but we build many, many other tools off of them. And at the core of them is this concept around the trajectory towards the future, as well as in the center, you see the integrated support star. So I will slightly touch base on those as we set the stage for talking about smart homes. Core belief, our core belief of the framework is that all people have the right and their families have the right to live, love, learn, work, play, and pursue their life aspirations in their community. So everything about our framework, no matter what target population we're working with, this is our ultimate core belief and what we're working towards. We start doing this by focusing on the person and really understanding what they want. So when we're starting to talk about the housing situation or a smart home, we have to understand that individual's personal abilities and their preferences and their strengths. But we also have to think about that family unit. Who else is in that home? How will this support the entire family? Maybe what we're really needing to support is the caregiver because it needs to maybe lessen something that's happening to them as they're providing supports to somebody else. So thinking about that entire family unit. Another key principle of the framework is to really think about the core sort of life domain areas. So although we're talking about housing and the community and community living, how are we thinking about how housing impacts health or vice versa? How does housing impact daily life and employment? How does housing and having a smartphone impact our safety and our security? Does it help? Does it hinder with that? How does having a smart house help you with your relationships, and can it create opportunities for reaching out to others, or again, is it a barrier? So we use those life domains as we're constantly thinking about whatever topic it is that we're really working on and talking to somebody about. The other thing is around the framework is that no matter what problem we're trying to solve, we talk about doing it within the frame of 3 buckets: discovering and navigation. If you don't have the information and don't know how to buy it and navigate it, then it's not going to happen. The green bucket is around connecting to others and to connecting to support. So, talking to peers, talking to other families that maybe have used some of these devices. But then there's also the goods and service bucket. That's actually, how are we paying for things? How are we getting those things? How are we getting trained on those things? So the 3 buckets really help us think about, when we're problem solving, very specifically, how are we meeting the needs of that individual? We do all of this through the lens of what I call our integrated support star. And that star is a way for us to really problem solve whatever the key issue is. And I'll dig into that in just one second. But we do this across the trajectory. Ultimately, a trajectory is wanting to lead us to the vision that we want in life and away from the things that we don't want. And so, if we start talking about what's the purpose of the smart home, what's our vision for that? What is it that the person wants to achieve? What's it helping them accomplish? And we can do that across the entire lifespan. So that was a really quick slide of each of the key principles that we use when different people are trained to use the life course framework to think about when they're problem solving with somebody. Each month, David and I hope to hit on a different life domain. So last month, we talked about social and spirituality and social isolation. This month, we're really talking about technology and as it relates to community living. But next month, we'll be really focusing on healthy living and the technology that supports that day-to-day healthy living and wellness. So specifically as it relates to living at home, this is our trajectory. And so this is a blank tool that you could sit down with and either take notes or have the person help you fill out. And what I always say, and what we're trying to achieve today is, the vision for us sharing about smart homes is ultimately to help people stay at home and make living at home more efficient and more easier, more convenient. So when we start looking at the different technologies, what is it making easier for a person, or what is it helping a person do or overcome? Ultimately, we look below that vision and we see what we don't want. People don't want to be unsafe. They don't want to be dependent on others for everything. They want to, increase their independence, and they don't want others worrying about them all the time. So when we're creating smart home strategies, how are those strategies helping to move us away from the things that we don't want and move us to what we do want? We further use this tool, the trajectory tool, to also help us think about, well, what's working well? So when you start thinking about adding smart technology to the home, are there things already working well? You don't want to change things that somebody already is efficient at or is keeping them independent with. But when we're looking around the home, are there things there that you struggle with? Is it hard to get to the lamp in the corner of the room? Are there things about your home that are unsafe? Are you worried about your washer and dryer in the basement, flooding and you can't get down to the basement? So anything above that line is a way for you to problem solve and brainstorm around what's working well, you don't want to change. And below that line are some of the things that maybe are issues that you want to use technology or smart home devices to change, to overcome. So then once you identify sort of what's working well, what's not working, and where you're heading, you can use the integrated support star to really start digging into that. So this is the star. If you're not familiar with it, I always tell people, think about it gives you 5 solutions when you're problem solving with somebody. Again, whether we're problem solving around a smart home or whether you're trying to figure out what do you want to eat for dinner tonight. The first thing you always think about is that individual that's going to use that device. What are their abilities that they're bringing to the table? What are they able to do? What are they able to afford? I mean, even the finances are a part of this conversation. And what do they like to do? Are they someone that is really techie and likes all that stuff? Or are they somebody that's very intimidated by that? So the first part of that star on that on that sheet you see to your left, the blank one, is to really kind of understand really that individual and or their family. Moving to the right side is really thinking about the people in their life. If we're really thinking about making the house smarter, are there people that know how to use that technology? Are there people that they want to connect to? And that's why you've listed them there. So are there family and friends? Are there acquaintances that can help identify devices, or even help make it happen, or train on them, or maybe it's the devices themselves that connect you to those relationships you have in your life. Eligibility-based supports. When I start thinking about smart homes, you can start thinking about, is there funding available that covers this? Based on either maybe what services you receive, maybe based on a diagnosis, or other types of things like that. So, or maybe there's not. So you need to understand what you're eligible for in terms of paying for these devices, training on these devices, sustaining and maintaining these devices. The community. There are a lot of things available for you in the community to learn about smart homes. So are you accessing your, local Lowe's store? Are you going to, the different places that are hosting trainings about the different devices? So don't forget about how the community can also support that. There might be foundations that you can actually tap into funding streams for. And then specifically the technology itself. There's all types of technology. So when you're thinking about a smart home, is this a personal device that somebody's using to make their day-to-day life better? Maybe it's an assistive or adaptive technology, or maybe the technology itself is something you're putting in the environment. It's something around the home. So that STAR really kind of helps you start thinking about all of the different ways to think about planning for smart homes. So with sort of setting the stage around smart homes, I'm going to now pass it over to David, who is going to start sharing some of the technology specific examples that you can start doing.
All right. Thank you very much, Shelley. Good stuff. Every time I look at the life course materials, I see other ways that we can apply that in the world of assistive technology. And I was actually scribbling some notes there as you were talking. So, well, good afternoon, everybody. And I'm extremely glad to be here. I'm David Baker. I'm the director of Missouri Assistive Technology, which is the state of Missouri's federally funded assistive technology program. And our mission is to increase access to and acquisition of assistive technology for people with disabilities of all ages, as well as individuals who are aging in place or just aging in general. Just to give you a little bit of background and kind of how some of what I'm going to talk about is actually personal to me. We all have our pandemic story, where we have somebody we're trying to stay in contact with or somebody that we're worrying about on a daily basis. And I happen to have an 87-year-old mother who's an extremely independent person and continues to live by herself up in central Iowa. And she's tried very hard to stay positive despite everything that's going on in the world. And so I think maybe for the first time in my professional life, I've actually connected with my mother in some way, shape, or form through some of the ways we can use technology and some of the other things that have been useful in helping her stay connected and prevent her from being socially isolated. I have about 30 years of experience working predominantly in the world of assistive technology, but have also just kind of been dabbling around in the world of disability and independent living as well. One of the things that I always try to stress when I give presentations about assistive technology, we all kind of have a view in our head as to what it is. Sometimes we think it's more complex. Sometimes we think it's really simple. But my philosophy has always been with assistive technology that it's 10% knowing the devices that are out there, being aware of the thousands of different devices that are out there is 10% of the equation. The other 90% of the equation for assistive technology is creativity. How are we going to take these inanimate objects that are sitting on a shelf that can help somebody address a barrier, and how are we going to incorporate them creatively into somebody's life so they're motivated to use them, so they can see new applications for them, so they continue to learn about them, so they can do the things that they want to do. So Shelley, if you can move on to the next slide, we'll start talking a little about smart home technology. All right, so smart home technology, what is it? And the picture here that's on the slide might be the image that many of you have in your mind about smart home technology, because it's generally sold, broadly speaking, in terms of convenience. So some of the things that come to mind when I look at this picture are that smart home technology is about convenience. It's about shopping. It's about listening to a news feed. It's about listening to music, maybe. You know, a lot of these things that we do with some of the devices that we have, but smart home technology is about more. It's about much, much more than just the convenience factor. So if we move on to the next slide, we'll talk a little bit about why it's about more than just convenience. But before we do that, I want to take one step back, and that is kind of draw the big picture here about smart home technology. So what smart home technology is it is part of a larger movement that's kind of been evolving in the technology world over the last 5 to 10 years, known as the Internet of Things. So the Internet of Things is the idea of taking devices, connecting them to Wi-Fi, enabling them to talk to one another, and then also collecting data about the user. We see it in business. We see it in personal life. We're seeing more and more Internet of Things types of devices out there all the time, and it's a vastly growing area in the technology world. And so generally speaking, when we talk about smart home technology, we're talking about devices that can be controlled either remotely via an app, that might be on some type of smartphone or a tablet device. And then we're also talking about another entry point into smart home technology, which is somewhat akin to this, but maybe what people are a little more familiar with is using some type of voice assistant, like an Amazon Alexa or a Google Home. So there's not a lot of technological complexity to these, but there's, those are a couple of basic kind of facts as to how this is working. So we're about 5 to 10 years into the development of this whole world of smart home technology and the Internet of Things. And since the beginning, the whole idea of smart home technology has been one that has been incredibly exciting for people with disabilities and for those who are aging. And so if we move on to the next slide, I can answer, the basic reason why it's so exciting is that through the lens of aging and disability, smart home technology is more than just convenience. It's about safety, it's about security, it's about addressing barriers, increasing independence, decreasing reliance on other people, and just generally providing new tools that can enable somebody to do something independently. So some of the basics, when I was sitting here trying to decide exactly what all I was going to talk about here today, and I really wanted to focus more on devices than just kind of the infrastructure of this whole world of smart home technology. So the devices that I'm going to show here in a minute are going to be based more around safety and security, or just getting started in the world of smart home technology. But there are some basic pieces of this equation that are very important to know up front. One of the first things, and one of the most common questions I get about smart home technology is it difficult? How hard is it to get started? We're all a little somewhere different on the journey of technology in general. But my kind of general rule of thumb on smart home technology is, as long as you don't allow your desire to go beyond your abilities on this particular day, it's not overly difficult to get started. Most of these devices, if you've got a device like a smartphone or Google's, well, let's just start with the smartphone or the tablet or smartphone example. If you can load an app on that and you've got Wi-Fi connection in your home and you can follow the instructions, and a lot of times they provide very nice instructions in a video format, then you can probably get started with going down this road of smart home technology. However, one of the key things is that Wi-Fi access is a must. Remember, this is part of the Internet of Things, and so having the ability to connect smart home devices to Wi-Fi is an absolute, as is having some device that can receive an app, because you're basically controlling all these off of an app that you might have on a device or coordinate with your Amazon Alexa or something of that nature. A real common issue that comes up in discussions about smart home technology is about safety and security. We've probably all seen a headline that says something like Amazon Echo listening in on us, or Ring doorbell cameras hacked. And while those are sensational and they do from time to time happen, the bottom line, and this is a conversation that you would need to have with anybody who starts to go down this road or is interested in going down this road, is that anything that is part of the internet you're always giving up a little bit of your privacy, or there's always that outside chance that the security is going to be breached. Is it any more or any less than every time you use your debit card at the grocery store? Probably not. But you do need to have a conversation with people about how safe do they feel utilizing the internet, and do they have any security issues if you start to go down this road of smart home technology. Often get asked if smart home technology is expensive. It can be if you really scale up, and we've all probably seen like really cool pictures of homes that have everything automated, but we're talking about getting started, beginning to go down this road and identifying some ways that this can be used for safety and security for the people that we work with. And in that case, and you'll see this illustrated as we go through the slides, the answer is no, it does not have to be expensive. $50, $75, $100, I can actually get started with 2 or 3 devices that enable me to do something today that I wasn't able to do yesterday. The key thing that we always want to do when we're exploring smart home technologies, we want to avoid the box problem. The box problem is something that I would imagine most folks that are in attendance today have experienced in your life, where you go to the store and you go, I'll take one of those, and I think I want one of those, and golly, that over there is pretty cool as well. And you get home and all you've got is a bunch of open boxes because you're kind of overwhelmed. So what we want to do, and we want to do this in any realm of assistive technology, is we want small victories. So don't get excited, find one or two things maybe here that we're going to look at. And that is where I would start so we can avoid the box problem. So again, small victories is always our goal in assistive technology. And we want situations where somebody goes, I purchased this, I set it up, I made it work, it helps me address a barrier, mic drop, cool, let's move on to the next thing. All right, talking about moving on to the next thing, let's move on to the next slide. Those of you who were on the call in February might remember this slide, which we put up there real quickly. And this was all part of something that's a kind of a concept that we're sort of helping address here or introduce people to as we go through the various assistive device topics that we're going to have in this series. And this is what we consider the different levels of technology. And I am a big proponent of the idea of you start at the no tech, low tech side of the equation over there on the left-hand side, and you move your way up to the high tech. So where does smart home technology rest on this scale? And I would make the argument that it's probably in the medium tech area, or it may actually be in the light tech area. If you're really tech savvy and are familiar with using a tablet or using your smartphone and know a lot of the tools and tricks there. So it's not going to be, even though it looks like high tech, it really isn't, in my opinion. It's more in the medium tech to the light tech arena. And so that usually is a little bit easier to set up. There's less training, there's less complexity to it in terms of, batteries and all those types of things that kind of lurk out there and every now and then jump up at us. So let's move on to the next slide there, and let's start kind of rolling through and looking at some of the devices. So again, my goal here is we're going to look at about 12 devices, and I'm going to give you just what I refer to as a baseball card overview of these devices, and that's just going to be a couple of facts. And I want everybody to kind of keep in mind that there is probably somebody that if not multiple people that that this device that I might show might be an excellent solution to help them address a barrier or to achieve something or just generally improve their ability to live independently. And so hopefully you'll identify some things that you can start exploring with individuals out there and get some of those small victories going. So the first thing I want to start, and definitely fits in the bill of safety and security, and that's smart smoke detectors. And there's several of these on the market, and probably the most famous of them is the Nest, the one that, the one that came out from Nest a number of years ago. And this was one of the very first smart home devices that came out, and was actually the one that probably caught my attention more so than any, because of the fact that, for how many years have we had these little things we've stuck up on our ceilings that have a 9-volt battery, and they make a sound. You burn the toast, it makes a sound. You actually have a fire, it makes the same sound. It's a technology that obviously hadn't been updated in a lot of years. So the Google Nest Protect is both a smoke alarm and a carbon monoxide alarm. And it has the ability, if once I download the app and I have it all set up, that it can provide me with alerts, both if you're inside the home, the alerts would be, it starts with a voice, and then if it detects a serious situation, it has a very loud siren, which I believe is about 80 decibels. And then it can send alerts out to as many as 6 individuals. So that could be a caregiver, that could be a family member, it could be a neighbor, anybody that might need to be alerted that there is something going on that might need their attention, which already, the ability to send out alerts to individuals, as well as a combination smoke and carbon monoxide alarm, makes this a lot better than the traditional smoke alarm that we've been putting in the house. The other thing that I really like about this is it has the technology that's in this has really evolved from what we are used to. And it has the ability to discern between a little burnt and an actual emergency. What I mean by that is I'm sure we have all set off our smoke alarm at some point or another because we left something on the stove a little too long, or maybe we had the toaster cranked up a little bit and we got a little bit of smoke in the house and it set off our smoke alarm. In the case of the Nest, the technology that's in it is significant enough that it can discern between those kind of things that are noticeable and might warrant some concern, and an actual emergency in the sense of a fire or smoke beginning to fill the house, those types of situations. And then the other thing that I really like about this, which they don't really, as far as I'm concerned, bill as much as they should, it also functions as a nightlight. So not only are we preventing people from the hazards of carbon monoxide and smoke and a fire, but if I get up in the middle of the night to go down the hall and I have a Nest mounted on my ceiling, it will sense that I am walking past and it will cast a very ambient light down and help assure my safety as I'm walking under it. And I think, again, we all probably know of some situation or another where somebody has been hurt in the middle of the night because they were walking down a dark hall. So going back to one of the things that I talked about a little bit earlier, is it expensive? For the Nest itself is around $120 or some variation. I would consider it the upper end of this technology that's out there, but there are several other lower cost versions of it that are on the market that do similar things and might be totally satisfactory. And I always think, I would gladly spend $120 to have a nightlight, to be protected, to get notifications out to people in the event of emergency, all those types of things. So let's move on to the next. Oh, I forgot to mention, and Shelley, you can stay on the slide you are. You might have noticed that on the bottom right-hand corner of the Nest, there was something called the Roost Smart Battery. And I just stuck that down there because I recently came across this. I had not come across it. So if you have a lot of smoke alarms already, but you still want to make them smart, you might look into this device, which has a little microphone built into it and a little microchip. And so if it senses a traditional smoke alarm going off, that little microphone and microchip could then be paired with an app and send out notifications. And the Roost battery, I think, was around $25 or $30. I just thought it was kind of a unique little option that was out there, and I wanted to share it with folks. So let's move on to the next slide. And these are another form of smart technology that's out there that's really useful in a lot of different situations, is the door and window contact sensors. Individually, they are very inexpensive. They're about $15 to $20. There's multiple companies that are making these out there. And their purpose is to alert someone when either a door is opened, a door or window is either opened or closed. So if you have somebody that maybe has a tendency to wander, and you need to know that the back door has been opened up, or that somebody has come home, then they will send a notification to multiple devices because they will sense the opening and the closing of the door. The app can also be used to check the status of a door, or the window. So if you want to check in at 3 a.m. just to make sure somebody is still there or the door is shut, you're able to do that. Plus, you can see the history of when people have come and gone out of a particular door. So very simple, very useful piece of technology. We all have somebody in our life that we're probably kind of curious whether they're coming in and out of the door or the door's been shut behind them, all those types of things. And this would be a great way to get started in addressing that issue. This is also an example of a device, in my opinion, that people have used creatively over the years, because I've heard people talk about how they use this on cabinet doors. If they have somebody that they're, maybe trying to regulate their diet or something of that nature, then these have been put on cabinet doors so they get an alert that somebody is in the kitchen and opening the cabinet, or even a refrigerator is another example where I have heard people have used these to get notifications to address some issue that they are dealing with. So if we move on to the next slide, Um, this might be the least glamorous device that I will be talking about today, but it can also be potentially one of the most impactful. And these are water leak sensors. Okay, so think for a second. You probably know somebody that shouldn't be going down the stairs, or for whom going down the stairs is troublesome. Or you know somebody that has a tendency to fill the bathtub or the sink in the bathroom and walk away, and there's water all over the place, which is also creating a slip and fall hazard as well. So the idea behind these these water leak sensors is that they can be placed near items that are water sources. So bathtubs, water heaters, the sink, the toilet, the dishwasher, the washing machine, all those locations. And if they sense water, then say something is overflowing or there's a leak in a pipe or something of that nature, they're going to send an alert out. And these alerts then are notifying not only the person who maybe resides in the residence, but somebody else like a caretaker. And then not only are they going to let you know it's detected a water leak, but if the issue has been resolved, then it will let you know that as well. And by resolved, I mean somebody's come down there, they've identified it, maybe they've turned off the faucet, the water's no longer running, that type of scenario. And then finally, there's a built-in option in these water leak sensors that is designed around the idea of all letting you know if it's beginning to lose power. They have, each of the sensors has two little AA batteries in it, and those aren't exactly the longest lasting batteries out there. So I thought that was kind of a nice feature to let you know that those batteries are beginning to become weak. So if this was to be alerted, not only am I going to get the notification on a smartphone or a tablet, but it's also going to emit an audible alarm. And again, it's amazing the amount of decibels that gets cranked out by some of these items that I'm showing you. And this one I think was in the 60 to 70 decibel range. So that means I can be a long ways away from my basement. And if this thing goes off, I'm going to hear it. And then if I needed to address the situation, I can either turn it off through the app, or I can turn it off then at the actual source. Incredibly inexpensive, $20 to $50 each of the sensors. So if I had multiple sensors, obviously it'd be a little bit more expensive. But if you think of the cost, if you have somebody that overflows a bathtub and they were to slip and fall, and you think of the cost there, or just the saving of health and safety, or if you think about damage that could potentially happen if you have a second floor bathroom and somebody overfills that, then that can be, that's a really, really good investment. If we move on to the next slide, we will start looking at some stuff around the doors. And so we're going to look at some door locks. We're also going to look at some of the doorbell cameras that are out there. Smart locks have been around, again, pretty much since the beginning of the era of smart home technology. And they usually come in a couple of different flavors, for lack of a better description. There are ones that can be installed brand new, where you take out the existing and you put in the smart lock, or there are several like the one that I have illustrated here, which I believe is I've forgotten which one that is. Oh, it's a Wise lock. I'm sorry. So the one I have illustrated here, which is by a company called Wise, one of the reasons that I kind of like this one is that it can be installed over an already existing lock. So again, you can either put them in place of what you had, or you can put them over an already existing lock. So there are a lot of ways that these can be used in a lot of different situations. And so I have the ability to remotely lock and unlock my door. If I have a caregiver who I'm not 100% sure, I want them to have a key, I can give them what's known as a virtual key that'll give them access. Just some of the things I described about the door and window monitors, they're also in play here. So there's just a number of different ways that these can be used to assure that doors are locked, unlocked, without me having to get keys out, to monitor people coming in and out of the door, to provide safety features by providing the virtual keys, all those things that we can creatively do to use these to ensure people's safety and security and ease of access. A little bit more expensive in terms of smart home devices that are out there. $120 to $150 is approximately what I have seen these and all the other devices so far that I have talked about. If you go down to Lowe's or you go to Home Depot or go to about any hardware store in this day and age, as well as places like Target, I've been seeing these things popping up in just about any location. So there's lots of opportunities that people have to be able to see them and learn a little bit more and read up on them at your local store. Plus Missouri Assistive Technology, we always have information on these. And if you're in the Kansas City area, you're certainly welcome to come out and see some that we have in our demonstration center. So I'm going to pause here real quick because I thought I saw a couple of messages coming in and I wanted to get those. I'm sorry, I kind of missed a few of these. So I'm going to go back to the Nest here real quick. And somebody had asked if the voice is pre-recorded or you can record it. To my knowledge, you can't record, that it's a pre-recorded alarm that you put in there. But that's a good question. That's one I'll have to come back to. And then there's a couple of questions about voice command. But before I get to those, somebody had asked if the water detector could be used to alert if a sump pump stops working and water is beginning to overflow. I would assume so. If there is some way for the sensor to be put in close proximity to maybe where the water would be coming out, it would, I'm pretty confident, have the ability to sense that and provide you with an alarm. That's actually a really good question, and that's one that I hadn't thought about, but I should, seeing how I have a sump pump in my own home. And then there are a couple questions in which somebody asks about voice command. And that we're going to touch on those a little farther down in the slides here. But most of these, and I forgot to mention this I forgot to mention this earlier. And that is that, yes, a lot of these devices can be paired with the Google Voice Assistant products, or the HomePod by Apple, or the Google or Amazon's Alexa series. And that's a little bit more complex in terms of smart home technology, but those devices usually focus as a hub as well. And a lot of these can be paired with them. One of the things that's always of concern is we could have a whole discussion just about hubs themselves and what it is and who works with what. Still some technological things to be worked out with using some of these devices with one another. So my caution there is always check to see whether or not it's compatible with a Google product or all products, or some of those types of issues. So those are some higher level technical things that are always definitely worth spending some time talking to others, talking to somebody at one of these places like Lowe's or Home Depot and working through. But generally speaking, yes, a lot of times these devices can be paired up with the voice assistants. All right. I think those were the questions in there, unless Miranda, you've seen something else. And if not, we will move on to a little bit of a discussion about cameras. Okay, so we're going to look at the outside cameras, which are generally referred to as doorbell cameras, and then we're going to look at indoor cameras. But let's have a little conversation about the ethics and morals of cameras. And I will actually tell a personal story. I'll kind of wrap myself out here and reference my mother at the same time. Not everybody is comfortable with cameras. Cameras can be used in a lot of effective ways to address a lot of issues that might be of concern or around safety and security. But if you are investigating doing anything with cameras, if it's on the outside of the home or if it's on the inside of the home, complete transparency in your conversations is a must. People, like I said, aren't always comfortable with having cameras. And so to tell a quick story on myself here, early on when they started coming out with some of these cameras, I got one of the early products by Nest, and I thought, I was a little cynical about it, in the sense of I didn't really think that I could put it somewhere multiple miles away and that I could get a notification where I was at on my phone. So I took it up one time to Ames, and I thought, well, my mom's house is a really good place to try this out in. And she'll never notice, right? I'm just going to set it down here facing the wall in the basement in the far corner, set it all up, turn it on, go home, see whether or not I can turn it back on and see the wall that I had it facing. Okay, so didn't have the conversation with my mother, really didn't think it was that big of a thing. Got back to Kansas City. It wasn't even 2 hours after I got back to Kansas City when I got a phone call from my mother. And honestly, she hasn't really talked to me like that since I was 16 years of age. She was not a happy camper. So while I didn't violate her or I wasn't totally transparent with her, and I certainly didn't violate her rights, but my little experiment definitely backfired on me. So, you know, let my lesson be your lesson as well. Have a conversation. Make sure the person is comfortable with it, and be transparent on what you're going to do, what it's going to see, how it works, all those types of things. Okay, so doorbell cameras. These are amazingly useful, and many of us probably have these already on the exterior of our home. And there are a number of different ways that these can benefit people with disabilities. Primarily security, in the sense of it enables me to be able to see who is at my door. And I can also have a conversation with the person at that door, because there are speakers and microphones built in to these devices. So if there's somebody knocking on my door, I can ask them to identify themselves, ask them what they want, or maybe I just get a notification that I just got a package from Amazon. And so as soon as I see the person walk off the porch, I go at my convenience to the door, open it up, and get that thing that I've been waiting for 24 or 48 hours that I so desperately wanted. So they can provide a view not only of you know, who's coming on your porch, but a lot of them also have a significant enough field of vision that they can also pick up people on the sidewalk, cars going by. It all just kind of, you know, what all it's going to pick up is going to kind of depend on if there are any obstacles in the way and the range of vision that particular camera has. And they're also kind of the technological equivalent of the butler, in the sense of I can distinguish if I want to take the effort to go and open that door. They're really handy for people that have mobility impairments, in the sense of it may take me longer to get from point A to point B. And so just because the doorbell rang, I really want to know if it's worth my time and effort to go all the way across, or because they have the speaker and microphone built in, I can say, hey, you know, give me a minute. I'll be right there just as quick as I can. There are one thing to know about these is that out of the box, they're pretty handy, and they can do some great things to make life easier, to protect people's safety, all those types of things. However, most of them only have a limited amount of recording life. So if you're somebody that wants to hang on to the history of people that have come to your door, and then some really advanced technological features, you usually have to get some type of subscription fee. But they're also incredibly inexpensive. And so between $75 and $150, and it's kind of a peace of mind type of thing. My mother has one. I don't care at 3:00 in the afternoon who's at her door and whether or not she got a package. So I ignore those notifications. But I've gotten a notification at 2 a.m. before. And yeah, I wanted to know what was going on in that particular instance, 250 miles away where my mom lives. So let's move on to the next, which are the indoor cams. A lot of the same features that I just talked about the outside cams are also true with the indoor cams. So they're portable. I can put them about anywhere. They work well. I can do the video. I can also do two-way conversation, which might be handy in the sense of if I know that I've gotten a notification and maybe something has happened, somebody's fallen, I have the ability to have some conversation, make sure they're all right, see if they need any help, anything of that nature. But one of the features I really like about some of these indoor cameras is what I refer to as what they call geofencing. I don't refer to it, they refer to it as geofencing. What geofencing is it is an area that I can draw related to that camera so that the only time that camera is going to send me a notification is in an instance where somebody has gotten into that field that I have set up for the camera. So to give you an example, and let's use my mother again, and I was transparent with her and walked her through all this time around. But my mother got really tired of me calling her all the time to make sure that she'd gotten out of bed in the morning. So and she was actually getting kind of irritated with me. And so our solution here was to use an indoor camera where I have mounted it in her living room. And so when she gets up in the morning and she steps out of the back area of the house into the living area on her way to the kitchen to make her tea, I get that notification. So I don't have to call her anymore, but I know that she's up and she's moving around in the house. So that's an example of how the geofencing feature works and how it can kind of ensure safety and security, as well as some of the other features that are built in the way of the two-way conversation in the video. You can get started with the indoor cams at about $30, and some of the more elaborate setups are about $300. So a lot of options in the indoor cam arena. So if we move on to the next device here, and I'll go through these really quick. And these are smart lighting. And then on the bottom right-hand side, you're going to see smart plugs or switches. This is a great dip your toe into the smart home device arena. About $15 to $30 is what you're going to spend here. And I can take any existing light socket and I can screw in one of these bulbs that actually has a microchip in it, and I can pair it up with the app, and I have the ability to turn lights on and off. So maybe I have a switch that's not convenient for me, or I want to turn on some lights as I'm entering the home. I might consider the smart lighting. I can do the same thing by switching out our traditional, what they refer to as dumb switches, and replacing them with a smart switch like you see on the bottom right-hand side there. Again, pair it up, and maybe I have a ceiling fan that I can't reach the cord or the switch isn't convenient. I can turn it off using my app because I've turned a dumb switch into a smart one. If we move on to the next slide, another great dip your toe into the world of smart home technology. Along the same lines as the smart lighting are the smart plugs, where I can take and turn appliances into smart appliances by plugging them in to these individual freestanding plugs that I just plug into my already existing outlet. And I am then able to turn on a coffee pot before I leave the bed in the morning, or turn on a desk lamp that might not be easy for me to reach, or coming home to a dark home is very discomforting to some individuals, so I can turn on some lights inside the house before I actually enter. So again, $15 to $30, great way to get started in exploring how smart home technology works and maybe address some common problems. So if we move on to the final thing I want to talk about here, which are the smart speakers. And we could have a whole conversation about these, and because there are a ton of things that you can do just with the smart speaker. We talked a little about them last time when we were discussing some options for social isolation. They could be a standalone device that I can use to have books read to me, to ask it a joke, to let me know what the weather is, to get my news feed, a ton of different uses. But they can also be paired up with a number of the devices that we've talked about so far. And they can function then kind of as a hub for making everybody kind of talk to each other nice. Again, you have to always double check to make sure that the devices you're buying are going to work with a particular hub if you have a Google or an Amazon product. And so they're a standalone device, but they're also a hub. And so they can be part of a more complex system, and I can do multiple things across multiple devices in multiple parts of my home simply by using my voice. You can get started in those for about $40, and they scale up from there. And then, oh, Shelly, okay, you were good there. Okay, so these are three other things that I just put on people's radar screens. We don't have a chance to get into them, and I'm a little not 100% sure how excited I am about one or two of these. But we're starting to see some really nice devices come on the market that can monitor stoves so that somebody doesn't leave something on the stove or leave a burner on. They're working off of motion sensors. And so it's a good safety feature. Smart pill dispensers. I was really hoping I could find some good stuff in that realm. but I'm not convinced these are kind of where they need to be to ensure med compliance. And then there's this whole line of what I refer to as finders for people that have memory problems. They lose their keys, they misplace their iPad, what have you. So just wanted to introduce folks to those real quick. And then if we move on to the next slide, just, always things to consider when it comes to assistive technology is, how are you going to get the device? How are you going to learn to use the device? How are you going to maintain the device? And those are all things that, going back to the life course, would be part of what you would want to think through. And I will pause there since I am up against the time to see if there are any questions. There are some funding. The closing poll is shown up on the screen if you want to take care of that. But there are some options through Missouri Assistive Technology to maybe fund these devices or certainly learn more about them. And so I would encourage people to reach out to us you can email me at dbaker@mo-at.org. And then also you can call us at 800-647-8557. And then finally, our website is at.mo.gov. And we would be glad to have specific discussions or broader discussions about this topic. So, and then, I got the poll in the way. So just a couple of final closing thoughts. We're not talking smart homes like Star Trek smart homes. Really what we're talking about here is smarter homes and utilizing some of the cool devices that have come out that are really impactful and can help people address barriers. When you go down this road, I talked a lot about it. We were talking about the cameras, but we also are talking about the internet, connecting things to the internet. So make sure that conversations are transparent if you're going down this road. And then also make sure the user is involved. What do they need to address? And again, can't say it enough, small victories in the world of assistive technology count for big things later on. So thank you very much. And Shelley, I don't know if you had something you wanted to say here quickly.
No, I appreciate everybody staying with us, joining us for this hour. I found it very informative myself, so I hope that you guys learned a lot. We'll be doing this again in a month, focusing on technology as it relates to health and wellness. If you email us, Robin, we can send you a copy of the PowerPoint. And we hope to actually have the recording up. And so you'll receive an email with where to find the recording and the PowerPoint as well. So we appreciate it. Check out our websites. Feel free to email us. We're here to support you guys as you guys are supporting others. So again, thank you guys so much for joining.